I'm your host, Riem Zin Labidin, and you are listening to Tic Tac Podcast.
Welcome, everybody. I'm so happy to be talking with you today. My name is Matt LeMay. I have had a strange career that feels like it spanned many worlds and many lives. I work as a consultant and author talking about product management now. I'm also a musician. I've been a musician for a long time. I was a music writer a million years ago, and I'm just really interested in how people work together to solve problems. I now look at that through the lens of how we build things professionally, but that's always been what's drawn me to music and to writing and to communication and to all these things in general.
I'm very excited to learn more in details about your journey, step by step, since the very beginning. And welcome, first of all, to this podcast. I'm very happy to have you. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me. It was so nice to meet you in Hamburg.
Yeah, and this was the opportunity. It was really amazing to meet with you and to attend your talk in Product and Meetup. And I got to learn a bit about your journey in the intro of
Yes,
the host. And then I was very interested to talk deeper about your journey. And I connected with you to have this conversation today. And I'm sure many people would be interested to learn more about you.
I hope so.
I'm sure one of them is my sister. You shared about one of your hobbies, which is
Yeah.
music. Maybe you can share some fun facts about you as a person to break the ice with the audience.
Yeah, a couple of fun facts about me. Gosh, I'm currently vibe coding an application to read secondhand vintage men's suiting listings. I got really into vintage fashion a couple of years ago, and that's still something that I find really interesting, like how a random suit you find in a thrift shop has a whole life behind it. So I'm trying to kind of decode and show some of that life, which I think is really interesting. Um, I have trouble digesting dairy, so I have my little lactose pills right next to
Oh,
my. I don't know how fun that is, but I looked around my desk to see what I could consider a fact. While I'm looking around, I have on my desk this little post-it note that says Matt's presence and influence, which was from one of the first retrospectives I ran with a company I was working with when they were talking about what was helping them, and one of their leaders wrote this on a post-it note, and I stuck it in my pocket. And this was probably 7 or 8 years ago, and I still have it on my desk to remind me that when I do good work, sometimes it helps people and makes a difference. And I'm really happy to still have that in front of me.
that's really cool. And because also you really care about impact, and
Yeah.
it's one of the greatest values that you believe in. But actually, how your journey started, you are working in tech industry. How was the transition?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is accidental. So I was living in New York. I was living with my mom because New York is very expensive and I was a musician. And in the course of being a musician, especially back before Squarespace or anything like that, if you wanted a website, you had to learn how to build a website. This was, 2005, 2006. So I had learned how to build websites, and then, we needed to have a system to deliver, this was right at the dawn of kind of the MP3 ubiquity era. Like this was right when people were starting to buy things on iTunes rather than buying things on CD. So I built a digital promo distribution platform so we could get MP3s to people so they could hear my band's second record. So I was kind of teaching myself how to do a lot of this stuff, not because I had a particular interest in it, but because it was fun and creative and I could do weird things, and there was no kind of playbook. Their websites all kind of looked different back then. So at a certain point, I kind of needed to move out of my mom's apartment and get a grown-up job. And I interviewed for some jobs in advertising and some jobs in tech, which was pretty much the standard two types of jobs a creative person who wanted to move out of their mom's apartment would apply for. And I wound up with my first job in tech as an API evangelist, so sort of a developer relations role. And then 3 months into it, I was apparently doing a pretty good job, and I had the chance to go full time. And I did a Google search for what's a job in tech with a decent salary if you're not very good at writing code. And product manager came up, and I said, I want to be a product manager. And here I am 15 years later, still talking about this stuff.
Wow, that's interesting. Before moving to product management, did you need to go through trainings or like how was this?
Yeah, it's funny because this was like 2010, 2011, and I feel like product management was just there was so much less visibility into it. There weren't a lot of meetups, there weren't a lot of books, there wasn't a lot of information. It was just kind of this thing that I think was very emergent and very poorly understood at the time. I think it's still poorly understood in a lot of ways, but at the time, there was no idea of like what would it mean to go through training or be verified or certified in any of this stuff. This was really still just like making it up as you go along, especially in a startup context. It was very much like make up your own title and hope for the best. In the early days of doing product management, a lot of what I did I think would not even read as product management. I was doing community management. At one point I was learning how to do data visualization so I could write blog posts that involved data visualizations. You just kind of did what needed to be done. And I think that experience really shaped my thinking about product management because as I got to know more people, even in more mature product organizations, even in big enterprises, there's always some ambiguity in this role, and you always just kind of have to figure out what needs to be done and then make sure it gets done. That really stuck with me.
And did you have to communicate with customers directly or just between the developers and like
It's a great
technical?
question.
Yeah.
I think I would have been a better product manager early on if I had done more customer research. I think the user research aspect of product management is something I really came to learn about and appreciate later. In some of my subsequent jobs where I learned that skill a little bit more, both by, working with people who were more experienced than I was and could show me, and just in learning the hard way that something you think is going to be a good idea isn't necessarily going to have an impact, isn't necessarily going to meet a customer need or solve a customer problem unless you really understand those things. So I think a lot of us who work in product have the experience of being convinced that our idea is brilliant and perfect and then seeing it flop and realizing that we actually have to get out ahead of talking to people because you're better off knowing ahead of time rather than putting a lot of time and resources and a lot of reputational capital into building something only for it to not really do what you thought it would do.
Yeah, and this is one of the challenges, like to have a vision before you move forward.
Yeah.
Do you remember when you started, what were the challenging parts of your journey?
I'll be honest with you, it was very challenging at the beginning. I think my first day working in a tech company, I went home and I cried because I felt like I was in so far over my head. I didn't know what people were talking about. I had gone previously, I had been like sort of the more technical person in non-technical capacities where like I was the person who, when I was working in the arts and in marketing, people would be like, oh, fix our computer, you're the computer guy. And suddenly here I was where, I showed up all like, oh, hey, fellow developers, like I know how to write Perl and PHP. And they were like, okay, Grandpa, we're all writing in Python here. And this guy can go and like hard code stuff in C. So, like, what are you talking about? And I was like, oh no, what am I doing? Like, I'm around people who are just speaking a different language and thinking differently. And some of them are really friendly, and some of them I think I immediately burned through whatever friendliness might have been there with my own kind of arrogance and sense of like, oh, I'm really good at this stuff. So I think I was humbled very quickly in this field. And I'm not sorry for that in a sense, because I think it really showed me that you just have to go in with openness and curiosity. You have to go in willing and excited in a sense to be wrong and to learn new things and to be around people who can do things that you can't do and who can see things differently from how you see them. And time again, I have done my best work when I have taken a path that is not the one I went in thinking I would take. When I've gone in being like, oh, this is clearly the right way to do things. And then I've talked to people, shared incomplete things and new and unformed ideas and really shaped things together with people so that it winds up being different from what any of us thought it would be going in.
Yeah. And like also about the direction that you took in your career, was it like along the way you are trying to figure out where to go, or you know that product would work well for you? Like, how did you figure it out?
I still haven't figured it out. I think, careers are nonlinear. And, people ask me, like, when did you decide to go independent and start doing consulting? And the answer is that I didn't really. I just met people I wanted to work with, and that was the easiest way to work with them. And then I kept doing it. And then I had some big opinions I wanted to write about, and I started writing about them. And I reached out to people. I'm very opportunistic in a sense. Like, I'm not like, this is exactly what I want. I want to be a product management thought leader. Like, both of those things are kind of accidental. I just like this work and find it interesting. And I kept writing about it and talking about it. I'm coming from a performance background as a musician. I'm just not scared to get on stage. Like I feel comfortable getting on stage. And honestly, getting on stage and talking about product is a lot less scary than getting on stage and singing about your feelings. So that feels fun and like something that's energizing, not depleting for me. Would I go in-house somewhere if the right role came along? Absolutely. Would I go work in something that's not product? Sure. Who knows?
Yeah.
The last couple of years, I've had the pleasure of going on tour, playing guitar in my friend's band. And if that's something I could do more of, I'd love to do more of that. If I could do more recording and mixing work, I'd love to do more of that. It's a big, wild, weird world out there. And it's
Yeah.
exciting to just kind of be open to what happens. And I found that for me, once I gave myself permission to be like, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what my next thing is going to be, but if I meet people who I want to work with, I want to find a way to work with them. If I find things I want to do and make a part of my life, I'm going to try really hard to make that part of my life. And the rest of it is all kind of made up, so we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, this is all about opportunities, and you are courageous to take the opportunities, even if it is not familiar sometimes. Do you do this? Like, if something really new, would you take it?
Probably. I mean, I don't know. Like I think one of the hardest things to do is to start doing things that you're not good at, right? Like I think one of the few regrets I have about, my younger self is that I did a lot of the things I was good at and stayed away from the things I wasn't good at. And that affected how I was able to just take care of myself as a person. Like I've only recently started like taking exercise classes. Like I started taking reformer Pilates classes. I'm almost on my 100th reformer Pilates class, which feels like such a win for me. Because when I started doing it, I was terrible at it, and I'm still not very good at it. But it's something that I enjoy now. It's something that makes me feel good. And I'm going into a space where I'm not like the big, fancy, important person. I'm just like, why is this guy here? Why is he huffing and puffing and falling over this machine? What's going on? And I think it's nice to be open to new things and to try your hand at things that don't feel natural and easy, and to let yourself get a little stuck and a little unstuck when you can.
Yeah, that's true. And it would be great if you can share how you moved from one role to another. Like, how did you progress in your career?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be very honest. Like, I got fired,
Mm.
and then I did a consulting gig, which maybe could have turned into full time, but I didn't feel like it was a fit, and I just kind of stalled out. And then I worked full time. The company got acquired. I didn't agree with some of the decisions that were made, and I quit. And from there, I've done a lot of like little one-off things. Like I've been working independently or, with business partners, but I haven't really had a boss since 2014. So every time I try to be really systematic and strategic, it doesn't hold for terribly long. Whenever I'm like, I'm only going to do these kinds of things, or like, I'm not going to take this kind of work, got to pay the bills. I think I've discovered, as a lot of people have, that the dream of being an independent practitioner runs up against the reality of it pretty quickly. That it's great when it's great, and it's scary and challenging when it's scary and challenging. And as with all things, it is trade-offs in all directions, right? There's no one perfect, easy path. You take trade-offs, you do your best to understand them, and the good and the bad and the ambiguously not quite either of them are all true at the same time. Like I remember when I was let go from one of my first tech jobs, the guy who was letting me go was like, "This is going to be the best thing that ever happened to you. One day you're gonna thank me." And in retrospect, I'm like, it's not that simple, right? Like, did it open me up to other opportunities? Yes. Was it really hard for me and my mental health? And the way it was handled made me feel really bad about myself when I had to go through a lot of therapy and do a lot of work to process that. Like, yes, that's absolutely true as well. Like, all of these things are true. And I think, you see a lot of like conference talks and folks on LinkedIn kind of being like, it looks like this, but really it was that. And it's like, well, no, it's always a little bit of both, right? Like very few things are that clear cut. And very few things are that like this terrible thing that happened was actually the best thing that ever happened to me. Or like this thing seemed like a great opportunity, but really it was my biggest struggle. It's like it's never that simple. life is complicated. Most things are, again, qualitative trade-offs in multiple directions rather than simple one-dimensional narratives.
And sometimes like a difficult situation make you take a big decision into a different direction. Like for example, I think it's a big step to be independent.
Yeah.
So I imagine this decision might be a result of your experience, or was
Yeah,
it
I mean,
that one?
I think it's I don't know. Like, if somebody had come to me when I went independent a month later and offered me the most amazing full-time job, maybe I'd be here talking about like, yeah, how I've been, going independent would be really scary, and I'm not sure if it's something I would do.
Mhm.
Like, a lot of things just happen, and I think that's one of the weirdly freeing things I've come to realize is that sometimes, things just happen. I remember one of the best pieces of advice I got when I was looking at which university to go to when I was younger, and I was, wanted to get it right. I wanted to make sure you only get one chance to pick which school you're going to go to. I really wanted to, and I was talking to a friend of mine. She was like, "Don't worry about it too much because whichever one you pick will be the only experience you have. So really, your job is just to make the most of it." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And she was like, "Well, you'll never know what would have happened if you had gone to a different one. It's not a real thing. It doesn't exist in space time. So make your choice as best you can, but then be done with it. And your job is now to make the best of what is happening." And I was like, that's really wise. Like, that's actually really helpful. Like, if I sit back, I'm like, what would have happened if I had done this? I'm like, well, I didn't do that. Like, my job is to be present in the moment, to make the most of where I am now, to try to figure out how to be where I am and make the most of where I am. And I found that framing really, really helpful. And I've tried to carry it forward in other future decisions I've made.
Yeah, this is wise. Like if you are living in a situation, at that moment you can take that decision.
Yeah.
You already, when you started, you took the step to write books, or how did you, like, is there someone who motivated you to put your ideas into a book, or like, how did it start?
Gosh, so I mean, I guess technically the first book I wrote was in 2007, 2008. I wrote a book, 33 and a third book, which are like these little thin books about records, about the Elliott Smith record XO. And I had no business writing that book in a lot of ways. Like I did the best I could at the time as the person I was to write a good book about that record. And I think, once you've done something once, it just feels naturally less intimidating. And I'm like, okay, I was, in my like early to mid 20s. I didn't really know what I was doing. I really struggled to get this done, but I got it done. I think that just sort of like when you've done something, it naturally just like shifts in your brain from thing I couldn't do to thing I can do because you've done it, even if you haven't done it exactly the same way. So, at a certain point, I started writing just like I actually gave a talk. I was invited to give a talk at a conference for newsroom product managers, and I gave a talk called "The Past and Future of Product Management." This was in, I think, maybe 2013. And I gave this talk and it was really well received. And I was like, oh gosh, like that's cool. People liked it. So I wrote it up as a post on Medium and it was really well received. People really liked it. And I was like, oh gosh, okay. And then I had happened to meet some folks at O'Reilly at the book publisher through some other work I was doing. And somebody there one of the editors had sent me a Twitter DM back in the day that was like, hey, if you ever want to do anything with us. I had forgotten about it. Then I remember really clearly I was just sitting at home and I was like, oh, right. And I sent them a message that was like, yeah, I want to do something. They were like, great, anything but a book. And I was like, what if it is a book? And I pitched them on, I think my exact wording was like a very voicey and opinionated book about product management. And they gave me deadlines and I met the deadlines. I wrote a book and I liked it. And then I tried to write another book and I did, but I didn't like it as much. And then I went and did a second edition of the first book and I really liked it. And then I did this book, which is my third book, and I really like it. So, the thing again, like the key to writing a book is you sit down and you write a book. And that sounds maybe silly and oversimplified, but like it's kind of true, right? You sit down and you do it and then you did it.
Yeah, and it's based on also what you have learned and like from your experiences, and then you put it into a blog post, a book, a talk, so people can also learn from you and your experiences.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think that's, when I wrote Product Management in Practice, my first book, the whole idea was like, what's the book I wish somebody had handed me when I started? And that was a really helpful prompt. I remember meeting with somebody and I was kind of telling him what I thought I wanted to do, and he was like, "You can't just give them everything. Like, you have to hold some things back. Like, be more focused. What are you going to do for the next book? You can't just put everything you think would be useful to a product manager in one book." And I disagreed. In that moment, I was like, "Yes, I can, and I will." And I was like, "Okay, well, that's what I want to do. Like, I want to just give product managers everything I think they need. Just be like, okay, if you're starting out in this role, or if you're in this role for a while and you're kind of lost and you're not sure what to do, like, here's everything I wish I had known. Like, here's stories from people doing the work. Here's patterns I've seen. Here's like everything I think might be helpful to you." And that really gave me some motivation to keep going and to do the second edition too. Because I was like, I started writing the second edition in 2021 when a lot had changed since 2016. And I was like, okay, let's get this out there. Like, let's write about what I know and what's new and what's changed and what I feel differently about and what I think I may have oversimplified and what I disagree with that I wrote in the first edition. So it's nice to have that as a guidepost of like just what's everything you wish you knew.
Yeah, and also knowledge will always grow. It's
Exactly.
not like constant. So even if you share everything now, the next years you will be discovering and exploring new things, so you can share.
Yeah.
Yeah. And about product managers or future product managers who want
Yeah.
to hear advices, would you like to share some of the tips for them?
I mean, I think the number one thing I'm finding myself telling people a lot, especially today with all the hype around AI and everything else, is like pay attention to your gut. Like, trust your instincts a little bit. If something seems wrong or unfounded or too good to be true or too simple to be true, trust that. Follow up with that a little bit. I remember early on in my career, the first time I heard about Agile, somebody was like, "Oh, Agile means you can do twice the work in half the time." And I was like, "Wow, that sounds amazing." But like when you actually get into it, it's obviously more complicated than that, right? And I think that with a lot of the rhetoric we're seeing now about product management is dead or like AI means this, I'm like, keep your critical thinking glasses on. Like, pay attention to what's actually happening. Always dive deep, always learn, always be open, always engage with the thing. Like, I learned a lot about Agile from reading about Agile and then from trying to do Agile stuff with my team. I'm learning a lot about AI now by building my silly little like suit decoder and a few other things I've built. But you learn a lot from doing in this role. I think my biggest fear doing what I do now is always that I'm going to get too far removed from it, that I'm going to be one of those people who like has opinions, but those opinions are not validated by practice. So it's important for me to keep practicing and spend a lot of time talking to and asking questions to and learning from people who are practicing in this field. Because again, I think the rhetoric can get far removed from the reality pretty quickly. And staying grounded in the reality is such an important part of this work as things change so quickly.
Yeah, it's really a good point that also we learn through practice. Like you can say that it might be that simple, but then when you are inside that bubble, you will discover other things.
Yes. And you always do discover, it's the same thing. You hear stories about like, oh, this company does product management so well. I read this story and they do this and they do that. And then when you get on the inside, you're like, well, it's a little different. It's a little more complicated than that because it's always a little bit more complicated than that.
Yeah. Like sometimes the product is very easy, it's very clear what are the requirements, etc. And sometimes it's not, and all depends on the product manager. So
Yeah.
that's why I think it's not that easy. About the communication with the engineers and also with stakeholders, and to be in the middle to deliver the right message and to do the specification very clearly, etc.
Yeah. Again, it's never that easy, right? And so much of it, as you said, depends on like not just the role, but the person in the role, like the actual human person and their experience and their way of working with others. I think part of why I find product management so interesting and part of why I stay at least adjacent to product management world is that it is such human connective work. Like you are in between different people. You're connecting engineers and designers. You're connecting the business and its customers. Like there is this deep human connection and communication layer that is so core to this work. And I love that.
And what do you think would be the impact of AI?
I think the only honest short answer is we don't know yet. We're
Mhm.
still figuring this out. Again, I'm vibe coding my third and fourth app at the minute.
Mhm.
Um, And God, I've never appreciated engineers more than I do after wrangling with Claude Code for these things. Like, I was just thinking about this, that like as a product manager, like, the classic product manager complaint is like you go to the engineers and they're like, no, we can't do that. But now I understand more why. Because like there are things that just don't make sense architecturally. There are things where like you have an idea, but the cost of it, even just this tech debt cost is like way more than what the actual impact is going to be. And engineers are really good at knowing that stuff. And like really good at like because I think their implicit incentive is like to not to work on crap or work on stuff that's poorly built or stuff that is going to make their lives miserable. Like they care a lot about how things are built and about the architecture and about things being like clean and performant. And I miss that. Like I think the human element of this is so important, and I'm really worried that we're going to lose sight of that and that people are going to feel like they should just be silos of one working by themselves and not working with other people. And not only is the process of building going to be way less interesting, but like the stuff we build just isn't going to be as good if we're all trying to go it alone.
Yeah. And your latest book is Impact First.
Yes,
I can
impact versus
see
product teams. I've got
product
one there
teams.
and I've got one here, so
Yeah.
I'm ready to promote it.
Yeah. Could you share some of the content of the book?
Yeah, I mean, so it's not a book I thought I would write. I thought I was writing a book about enterprise level service design called Putting It Back Together because I noticed that like so much of the last 20 years of software development has been about taking big things and breaking it down into small things. And I was like, how do we put it back together? But then when I started looking back over the work I've done, I realized that what made it possible to do that when I was able to do that with teams was 100% having clear impact level goals. Like when individual teams were looking holistically at what the business is trying to accomplish, then they kind of needed to work across teams. They needed to work with each other. They needed to work in different ways rather than just optimizing like more features, more of this, more of that, more of the other things. So once that clicked for me, I was able to kind of go back over a lot of the work I've done and be like, oh, these are all stories about teams that put impact first, that were like, okay, what is the business trying to achieve? Once I understand that, then I'm going to build in a really different way. I'm going to prioritize in a really different way. So that became what the book was about. It's just like really what are some stories and some examples and some questions that teams can ask themselves to make sure that they are putting business impact. And when I say business impact, I mean really, what the business model enables, right?
Hmm.
So impact as a function of the relationship between a business and its customers. When you put that front and center, you have to learn about your customers. You have to understand the business because if you don't, you're never going to actually do something that works. So that's really the idea behind the book is like if you understand the business model and what the business is trying to achieve and how much of it by when, then you are going to prioritize discovery because you need to. You are going to work cross-functionally because you need to, and you are going to work across teams even if that means more dependencies and more quote unquote slowing down because you need to.
Mhm. Yeah. And also maybe figuring out what metrics to look at to
Yeah.
give you a hint of where the product is going, or also in the future to see if you achieved the goal or not.
Yeah, absolutely.
And your current role is you are working with different companies, right? As a
Yep. I'm
product.
working with different companies. I'm consulting, I'm advising, I'm training, I'm doing what I'm needed to do, where and when I'm needed to do it.
I wish you success, and I'm looking forward to read your book. My sister have one has one copy.
Yes.
So, and to wrap up, I would like to ask you for an advice that you would, as Matt, you wished you would have known earlier. This could be like an advice for people who are starting their journey.
Yeah, I mean, I think the short thing I'd want to know is like there's no perfect answer. Like there's no perfect thing for you to do at any moment. Just keep moving, keep asking questions, keep talking to people. I think, especially with all the change that's happening now, I think the future really does belong to people who are not going to let themselves get stuck, who are just going to keep moving, keep trying, keep experimenting, keep seeing what's out there. And I think it's hard to do that if you feel like there's a single path set out before you that you either follow or don't. So paths are all windy. You never know where they're going to lead you.
Yeah, that's true. I think it's a good advice also for me. Yeah. Thanks a lot. I enjoyed talking to you. Thanks, Matt, for sharing about your journey.
This was my pleasure. Thanks so much for talking.
Have a nice day.
I'm looking forward to our next episode with a new guest and new inspiring story. Until then, stay safe and stay tuned to our next episode. Tic Tac, tackle the inspiration.